Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. Grateful that you are here. Thank you for spending time with us today. In the studio, live, in person, we have one of what I would say the best dance coaches in the world and in the studio. And I'm really, really excited to hear from her, to experience, the decades of case studies and experiments and stories that she has. And in my short time knowing her over the last few years, what I've seen is nothing but heart-centered leadership and someone who truly cares about those that she leads and interacts with, and also a willingness to try new things, which is not always easy coming from where she comes from, coaching one of the most successful dance programs in history. So I'm just going to read a little bit about her history in case that for those listening don't know. I know the dance community will recognize her instantly, but for my audience here, this is why you want to listen today. Okay. First of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. What an intro. Wow.
We're just getting started. Coach Amanda Gaines has been a part of the Gopher dance team for over 19 years, first as an athlete from 05 to 09. Winning national championships, then an assistant coach from 2009 to 2013. Then she took over the head coach position in 2013 to 2017, where she took a small break, re-entering back as head coach in 2020 to current day. That is awesome. But what's even crazier is that the team has won 23 national titles, and coach has been there for 20 of them. Insane. And so when you're around that level of excellence, there is a recipe, and given our time today, we'll try and get to a few of those things, but deeper than that, really the psychology behind who Amanda is and how she operates. That was what I'm most excited about. So Coach, thank you for, your style of leadership, and I'm excited to dive in.
Thanks. I'm excited too. Yeah.
So when you hear that intro, like you as an athlete, then you as an assistant coach, then you as head coach, what would you say is like one key insight or strategy or lesson that you've learned in each of those stages?
I think as an athlete, it was that dance had always been something that had kind of come easy to me. I started when I was 3. I started competing when I was 4. And it was just kind of what I always did, right? I never did t-ball or soccer. Like I literally never did. I did gymnastics for a little while, but upside down things weren't easy for me. So dance was kind of all I ever did. And it was something that for majority of my life came, fairly easily. I look back now, hindsight is always, such a gift. I look back and I'm like, oh, I could have done so much more training when I was, 14, 15, 16, when I was kind of in that age. I look back thinking like, oh, if only I had done this or worked harder here, I could have been so much more as a dancer. But when I think back to then being on the University of Minnesota dance team as an athlete, it was that like, you will never regret hard work. I think, like I said, as having been something that was easy to me, I don't think I truly understood like how hard I was going to have to work to succeed at something that like I just done my whole life. And I think part of that was because this team mentality became the priority all of a sudden. It wasn't just about like, what does this do for Amanda? It was like, what does this do for the team? What is the impact that this has on the legacy of this program? And that's kind of what became the fuel for all the hard work versus like my own individual accolades. And so that was just such a good lesson to learn and to have like truly gone through, because I think it makes sense as I'm coaching these kids, these 18-year-olds who are probably coming from that same position of really focused on the individual and reaching their own individual successes, to then being in this really team first culture, how to make that switch, because it can be really hard. As an assistant coach, I look back and I'm like, I just wanted so badly to have the answers. And I think it was such a unique position to be in. I was so, so fortunate to get to assist under Amber Jackson, who really like built this program, right? Like started to build this legacy, won those first national championships before like Minnesota dance team was what it is now. And so I was so fortunate to get to learn from her and be a part of the process and the role that I was in. And so again, looking back, I'm glad that I was kind of forced to have to take that step back and like go slow and just take it all in versus having to be the one that makes that like those hard decisions. Because now being in this head coach position, like, you know, the longer I do this, the more I like to say, like, if I know anything, it's that I know nothing. Right? Like the industry as a whole is continuing to evolve, which is so exciting. It feels like from a competition standpoint, like the goalpost is constantly moving. You never quite know what you're working towards, which is exciting, a little scary. But I think what it has reinforced for me is that like at the end of the day, it is about the relationships and the people. And, so as much as, you know, I have to make those hard decisions, I have to maybe choose alternates, choose who's on the team, choose what we're doing for choreography, what song we're going to do, what style we're going to do. At the end of the day, it's actually the relationships that keep me coming back. So when I was younger, it was about like the success. Sure. Now it is about like, what is the impact that I can have with these athletes, with these young adults? How can I help shape them, develop them, still win? You know, that's still the goal. We're still trying to win. My boyfriend will tell you I am the most competitive person he's ever met. And I'm like, well, we'll see about that. But, you know, I still like that still is a focus, but I think those relationships and being able to pivot my mindset to that being the priority has really been impactful. Yeah.
Two things that come to mind is one, that trajectory of athlete, assistant, head coach is so necessary to get all the vantage points to have your decision making come from a holistic place as opposed to maybe an egoic place or a one-dimensional place, right? And when you study mastery of anyone, there's always like an apprenticeship. Yeah. And the athlete and the assistant phase is like an apprenticeship, you know, and it's learning the ropes. It's like, ooh, how do you handle that situation? Watching someone else do it from a third party perspective, and all that data compounds over time. And then you're in actually the position to make the decision, and it doesn't make it easy, but you have tools that you've developed over time. Yeah. So that's really cool. And then the people first, team first, I love that. I think that that's essential for sustainability, longevity. When did that fully sink in?
I think when I came back in 2020. Okay. When I first took over as head coach in 2013, 2014, the pressure was immense. I think at that point, all I wanted was to run the program. Like I was like, I'm ready. Like I want to be the one making the decisions. Right. And so there was so much drive in me to prove myself in that way. That is partially why I ended up at the time I thought I was retiring. I thought I was stepping back from coaching in 2017 because my mental health just got to the point where I could not sustain this level of pressure, this level of expectation. I was not taking care of myself in a way that was allowing me to show up for my athletes as the best version of myself or as what they needed. I did not think I had the capabilities or the drive to make the decisions that needed to be made to continue the trajectory of the team in 2017. And so that was partially why I took a step back. At the time, too, I was also working a full-time corporate job on top of coaching. And I was kind of to this point in my non-coaching career where I had to decide, like, am I going to go all in with this? Or, you know, it was a tough time. So that was partially why I took that step back, because I think the pressures of it all were just really really getting to me, and I didn't think I was coaching for the right reasons. Like second place was the end of the world to me, you know? And so I took that time away, and, you know, I was still involved with the team. That first year out, I was basically just a super fan of the program, which was amazing. You know, the coaches that stepped in after me were, you know, dancers that I had coached on the team. So I had a really good relationship with them and, you know, felt like I was able to kind of mentor them and help develop them in that role. And they did amazing things with the program. And the next 2 years, I was able to do some choreography, and being kind of in that, like, I was a little bit closer to the process again. Just kind of reignited that, like, wait, why do I love this? Why do I want to be involved in this? And so it made me really take that step back of like, okay, dance is something I've done literally my entire life. It's all I've ever done. Do I really want to be out of the world? No, I don't. Do I feel like I'm ready to step back in? Yeah, I think I am, because I just had such a different perspective. And then I was actually announced as coming back as head coach it was like the end of February, early March of 2020. And so then like everything shut down. And so I had to all these big plans I had for coming back completely went out the window. And again, that was like probably the best thing possible that could have happened, because it made me actually completely reassess how I was coaching, why I was coaching, because everything that year was different.
Yeah.
Nothing was like it had been. And so when we did eventually get, you know, back to normal from like a season standpoint, my perspective had just shifted so much. And I was truly in it because of the impact I could make, because of the relationships I could build, because of, you know, the culture I could create, the way I could develop them. Like it was exciting again. That's not to say I don't feel the pressure still. Sure. There definitely is pressure
I want to talk about that
to execute, but that time away actually just allowed me to completely reframe my perspective.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's exciting again versus overwhelming. The
proving portion of that, you know, I think imposter syndrome can come in, comparison can come in, the I'm never good enough can come in, which is so common in anything, but particularly in dance. That just creates excess thought. So you're always anxious. It just never stops, right? And so to have that break and recalibrate and say, okay, if I were to come back, what would that look like? And what's gonna make it feel lighter and more expansive and more fun? And for you to land on relationships, which according to any research on longevity, happiness, fulfillment, purpose, like relationships is the cornerstone. I think that pivot is so important for any coach to hear, because especially new coaches or new athletes, they're like, I got to prove myself to the team. I got to and they edit themselves, and then it may work quote unquote, work for a season, but then they have this internal conflict of I can't be myself in this space, the space that I thought I loved. And then there's all kinds of emotional and mental distress, and it just creates a heaviness that doesn't need to be there.
Yes, heavy. Yes. I think, you know, the first few years that I was the head coach, I think I was so focused on gaining trust of my athletes through like proving my actions were the right choice. Whereas now I look at it as I'm gaining trust with my athletes because I'm developing a relationship with them, and they know that I have their best interests at heart. It's not that I have to make the right decisions and that's how I'm gaining their trust. It's that I'm getting to know them. I care about them. And that has actually released so much of the pressure about making the right decisions, because there is that trust that I can actually admit, like, hey, I made the wrong choice there. We have to pivot. But there's the trust that like they know I have the bigger vision. So it actually like released so much of that heaviness because I focused on like the right thing instead of my actions. It was more about like the relationship.
And you engaged them more as opposed to it being top down, one dimensional, my say is everything. It's more like, okay, because we have trust, And because I'm closer to you now, I actually realize more of your genius, which is cool. Maybe you should take more ownership in that. And that, I think that's a perfect example of that, is like having the team choreograph their own routines.
Yep.
Right? Like, I don't know, that wouldn't have happened earlier in
Probably
your career.
not. No, absolutely not. Yeah.
You know, so for you to develop those relationships enough for them to trust in themselves to do something that high of a level.
Yeah.
And then for you to be like, yes, do it. And then together work through that. Just a beautiful case study of of what trust can look like and the results of what that trust can produce, not just in winning first, but in the virality of everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible.
Yeah. Not to say there weren't a lot of lessons along the way with that process.
Of course.
But,
100%.
It was a very cool experience.
Yeah. Within the shift of the relationship first, what's one thing that has pre you leaving and then you coming back has shifted in practice or in conversations? Are you asking different questions? If so, what type of questions, or how is your coaching style, palpable to them?
I think it's a lot more collaborative now. I think, as I get older and I get more separated from, I get older, they stay the same age, right?
Right.
My athletes are always 18 to 22. And I, when I was 25 coaching, I think I felt a different, pull or connection. Whereas now being 38, there are things that I'm like, what is going on in your world? I don't get it. But I think it's a lot more collaborative in that I try to bring them along on the whys a lot more. Partially because I think they get a sense of comfort in that. And partially because I think it builds some excitement. That's not to say they get to know everything.
Sure.
There is value in sitting in that discomfort.
Yes.
And, we definitely are trying to develop that skill set in them. But I think I have found joy in bringing them along in the whys, because I think it does build that excitement. It gets them excited to work hard. And then it becomes collaborative, right? When I'm like, hey, here's my thought process, that gets them talking, and it gets me thinking differently too, right? I think, like I said, the longer I do this, the more I know that I need other people to maintain this, right? It's not just, I am not going to have all the answers. I have amazing assistant coaches. Even between the three of us, we're not going to have all the answers. We can bring in choreographers. They're not going to have all the answers. Like, it takes consultants and support and strength coaches and, athletic trainers and our parents and our families and studio owners and teachers and the team to make all of this happen. And so I think the more I have allowed myself to be open to collaboration, that is actually where some of the most impactful moments have come from.
Yeah, that's cool. When you're recruiting and bringing new athletes on, what is that initial conversation like when you've decided that this athlete can be a part of the team if they choose?
Yeah. I will say I have a love-hate relationship with the recruiting process. I love it because we get to know the kids and their families and their support system so much better. And so again, that relationship development happens so much sooner. I also hate it because we develop these relationships with these kids, but we have limited spots to offer. And so there are kids that I develop these relationships with that I really like. I just we don't have a spot for them. We don't have the budget to take more kids, or, there's so many reasons why a kid might not end up getting an offer. So that part becomes a lot tougher because I have these relationships with them throughout the process. I think for me, I always just like hearing kind of what it is, what do they see on the outside about Minnesota that makes them feel like it's the right fit for them. We talk a lot at clinics and throughout this process that a lot of what kids see as they're kind of doing their research about what team they want to be on is the highlight reel of social media. They're seeing the end result of a competition. They're seeing, snapshots of practice or a clinic. So I'm always really curious to kind of hear the dancer's take on, all right, what is it that you are seen, or what is it about the interactions you've had with us at clinics, at competition, that makes it feel like this is where you want to be? And that, I think, tells so much, right? It's so hot take, recruits, if you want to know how to get on the good side, when they're focused just on the competition side, that's kind of a red flag a little bit of like, ooh, okay, like, yes, you're seeing the end results and you're focused on the end results. It's when they can share an interaction that they had at a clinic where, a team member really helped them get a skill and then followed up with them and like celebrated with them when they got it. It's when they talk about, how they saw the coaches interact with the team on the sidelines, or, they heard a podcast. So it's when they can get deeper. I love hearing kind of what it is about Minnesota that makes them think it's the right fit outside of the competition piece.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. So you obviously experience high levels of pressure, expectations, and being that the dance is constantly shifting, the bar continues to rise. And from the last 20 years, I feel like you've navigated that. I'm not saying it's easy, but you have found ways to be resourceful and still perform at a high level. How do you think about the pressure and expectations? I imagine that throughout the course of your coaching, it has changed, but currently when you hear an expectation placed on you, right? Or you're sensing the pressure from the media, from the socials, like in your mind, what is happening?
I don't handle it well. I'll be the first to admit. I am not very mentally tough. Let's call it what it is. I think I used to be. I think as I've gotten older, again, like my sense of like protectiveness over the team has expanded. Like this like mama bear instinct kicks in. Whereas like before, it was about like protecting my own like ego. Whereas now the pressure is about protecting the team. Which I think is why it's gotten harder, because it's not just about myself anymore. I like the phrase, like if you wouldn't ask for their advice, like you shouldn't care what their opinion is. So I really have to lock myself in on that. I think when it comes to, elevating, it's about taking calculated risks. And I think you have to be okay with, there are times where you'll maybe take a risk and it won't pay off that year in terms of a championship, but the impact of what it can do for the industry long term is what's worth it. And so it's really about like thinking longer term than just like this year, as we're thinking about how we continue to elevate. And I think that is what has helped us maintain, because as much as we're thinking about, yes, like what will work this year, how do we top the aerial turn? It's less about how do we top the aerial turn and how do we continue to challenge ourselves? How do we continue to push the industry forward long term? And so I think taking that approach has really helped with that pressure. What's the worst that can happen? We don't win. Okay, we get on the plane and we come home and the world keeps turning, right? Which is, flippant to say, but it's real, right? Like, yes, it's tough because we work all season for one competition. That's what's so weird about college dance team is, we're used to growing up competing multiple times. You get to college dance team, you compete like once, right? We work on the same routines for months. We compete at once. It's based on, 8 people's opinion of us that day.
Right.
You kind of have to know what you're signing up for. And so you can put all of the work into that, but you have to be able to take that step back and see like what is the bigger impact outside of just the final result. So I think when we can focus on that makes that pressure a little bit more digestible, because you're still feeling the pressure to execute and win, but when you can focus on that a little less and focus on the bigger impact of, hey, if we do this, this can actually just push the industry forward and make the next year even more exciting. That's when it becomes a little bit more manageable.
So that conversation is going on in your head. I imagine you loop your assistant coaches into that. How much of the team gets to hear that type of thought most?
Oh yeah, we talk about it a lot. Nice. Because again, I think when they start to focus on just this one weekend of the year,
it's too big.
It's too big. So like as we're setting goals, a goal is always going to be win a double national championship, right? We want to win Pom and Jazz.
Right.
That's real. But we have to have other goals along the way that we're celebrating. And we have to have goals related to nationals that are outside of just winning, because we also have no control over that. It's not like, it's not like a lot of other traditional sports where you can come up with a game plan to go head to head against somebody and you know what their plays are and how you're going to combat this. Like, we start to see videos of people a week or two before we compete, but we're not like completely changing our routine because we've seen what somebody else is bringing to the table. So you have so little control over what else is happening in the space. And so we have to have those conversations as a team that it is so much bigger than just this one single weekend.
Yeah.
We are working towards making a larger impact. I think especially now, as we think about how the public has become a lot more invested in college dance team, so exciting.
Right.
That also plays a big role, right? Like it's not necessarily that we're certainly not trying to plan into going viral. You can't plan those things, but it is about how do we continue to elevate everyone in our industry in a way that's really going to drive for, equitable resources for all of us, for more recognition.
Olympics.
Yeah, right? So I think we have to have that conversation as a team about it being larger than just that one weekend, because otherwise that moment becomes too big. That's not to say that we don't focus on nationals and focus on winning, but there has to be that secondary piece that takes some of the tension off of those like 3 days in Florida.
What do you think most coaches, what do you think an area of growth is for most coaches? When you hear things through the athletes, when you connect with other coaches, you're hearing, how they show up and what they do, and you're like, oh, there's an area of growth there. Like, what would you say is something that if coaches were to focus more on, not only would they have more success, maybe in higher placement, but more engagement, more fulfillment, better mental health, overall satisfaction and quality?
Ooh, that's good. I say this as this being something that I am also like actively working on. I think it is that kind of like admission of making an error, or, I think as coaches, we feel so much pressure to be perfect and justify all of our decisions, even when we know they're wrong, or in hindsight, we find they're wrong. So I think that ability to kind of pivot and course correct and acknowledge of, hey, I'm still learning, has been really impactful for me. And so when I look at fellow coaches, especially that are just getting started and, feel like they've got to prove themselves, it's like helping them understand it's okay to course correct. It's okay to admit you tried something and it didn't work, and we're going to pivot. And so I think the more, and again, easier with college athletes than probably like high school or younger.
Sure.
But when you can bring your athletes along on that like evolution of yourself as a coach and admit that you don't always have all the right answers, and be open to that kind of journey of learning yourself, again, I think that just like unlocks so many doors versus I'm perfect, I make no mistakes, and everything I say is because I said so, right? Like when I was able to step out of that, I just felt like I grew a lot as a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And you became more relatable, which is everything. In regards to the expectations and the pressure, going back to that for a second, and being more collaborative, going more long term, what have you included into your routine to manage your energy better?
Yeah. I meditate every night before I go to bed.
Let's go.
Yes. I have my little meditation app. And when I lay down, I pick my little nighttime meditation. And that is how I, get ready for bed, fall asleep. I found it helps, especially, like we practice at night. So when I'm getting home at, 9:30, 10 o'clock, my brain is just racing. And so I found that this meditation has really helped calm my mind, and allowed me to really transfer those thoughts to the next day in a much more productive way. We do a lot of visualization as a team. And so I have also started to do that just like in my personal life, in my day-to-day life. I think, the mind is such a powerful tool if we let it be.
Yes.
And so I personally am just trying to do a lot of work around that in how I talk to myself, how I visualize, no longer kind of visualizing the worst case scenarios, but also visualizing the best case scenarios, right? But yeah, just lots of visualization and meditation, I think, has really made a positive impact on how I'm able to kind of combat those pressures and those negative thoughts.
Love that.
Yes.
And 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah. It doesn't take a long
time.
No. You can, it can be very impactful in even just short amount of time, short amounts of time. Yeah.
So going on to athletes, right, who want to improve and get better and compete at a high level, when you're at these clinics, when you're having these conversations, and maybe this shifts from generation to generation, because I imagine there's some differences there. So maybe you could talk to the differences, but also what is your biggest suggestion or a piece of advice for young athletes, maybe in middle school or high school, looking to join something like Minnesota, to start working on and deepening?
I think it's about being able to slow down. So I say that because, we talk a lot about being coachable. And, every coach is like, I want somebody that's coachable. And I think oftentimes kids think that being coachable means that I get a correction, I get feedback, and I'm very positive with how I receive it, right? I'm coachable because you told me to fix this, and I said, thank you, with a smile, right? But were you able to actually apply that feedback, apply that correction? And so I think sometimes dancers just start moving so fast through everything. So I'm thinking at a clinic, right? We're going across the floor. A member of the team or a coach comes up and gives you a specific correction. Are you actually pausing and taking a second to get that in your body and try it again? Or are you acknowledging it and just saying thank you with a smile and then just continuing on doing exactly what you were doing? So I think when dancers are coming to these clinics, they're taking classes, we college coaches are just saying train, right?
Yeah.
You want to dance in college, you've got to train, be versatile, be good at picking up choreography, do multiple styles. As you're training, are you actually slowing down to take advantage of all of the feedback and both positive and, corrections, opportunities? Are you taking the time to actually acknowledge and absorb that? Or are you thinking that you're being coachable because you're just being really positive with how you're receiving it, which is also important, right? You want to think through what's your body language? What's your outward energy?
Yeah.
But are you able to apply that? Because you've got all of these resources at your disposal. People are hungry to help you get better, but are you absorbing that feedback in a way that's actually allowing you to grow?
Yeah. So there's a really great thinker by the name of Naval Ravikant who was sharing an idea of how people think that just because they spent a lot of time on something that they've mastered it.
Yep.
And that isn't the case. It's you may have spent a long time, but your energy was at 50% all of that time.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference between time and then iteration. And an iteration is basically you perform something, you get feedback on it, and then you do it again to close that loop and make the adjustments. That's one iteration. So rather than, 10,000 hours I need to master this, it's really 10,000 iterations. So it may not take you 10 years. It could take you 2 years if you can get that many reps in that time.
Meaningful.
You know? And so like
work,
it fits with what you're saying is like, you could work hard and you could train, but if you're not getting the precise feedback and then immediately applying it and feeling that difference, is there growth?
Yeah.
You know, and how much, you know? And so you can be a completely different athlete from season to season.
Yeah.
If that is how you look at it. And so it made me think of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some really cool things or one cool thing that you do in practice that would sound completely absurd to the world? But you're like, we actually really love this and it works for us.
Oh, that's funny. I don't know that this is absurd, but you know, something we do at the end of every practice is grades. The team, and you know, this is not like a foreign concept to a lot, but the team, you know, shares like what was a great from practice. What is something that you accomplished or that you achieved or that was like a highlight of you for practice, either about yourself or about a teammate. We talk a lot that like if they can't celebrate themselves, how can they expect others to celebrate them? And it's interesting because majority of them have such a hard time
the hardest
acknowledging something that was good about practice. Like they struggle with like finding something good about themselves that day or something that felt like a success. Like, and we as coaches will be like, well, hey, like, what about that really amazing, like 7 pirouettes you did? And they'll be like, oh yeah. And you're like, okay, you know, so I think we really try to be intentional with acknowledging those little successes, but also equally acknowledging like, we've gotten to the point where some of them are better than others at this, but them being able to acknowledge, hey, I was actually having like a really bad turn day, but a great for me was that I did not like mentally shut myself down. I kept showing up. And so I'm proud of myself for that. Like that is equally as important to acknowledge. And so I think, you know, we as coaches really try to create that space and kind of hold them accountable to calling that out in a genuine way, because they are so reluctant to celebrate themselves sometimes that I think, you know, just as they're building their confidence, when they get to those hard days, they can then look back and be like, oh yeah, but look at all these like amazing things that have happened along the way. So we do that. I think people are oftentimes surprised. And I will admit, I'm not always good at this. My intentions are always good about this, but you know, time is of the essence sometimes. We spend a lot of time on the basics. When we're doing across the floor combos, if we're working on pirouettes, we start with a balance, then we go into a double and a triple before we start working on 5 pirouettes. And so, you know, like a lot of kids will be like, well, I'm an advanced dancer. I can do 5 pirouettes. And it's like, okay, well, show me your double. And if your double doesn't have the right technique, you're actually not an advanced dancer. And so we spend a lot of time on the basics. And so by taking that, like slowing down to focus on that entry level stuff allows us to go faster with the more advanced stuff. And so I think people are oftentimes kind of surprised by that.
Love that. I look at like a Kobe Bryant, one of my favorite examples of like athletes. He would always say like, what makes me so solid all around is I've mastered the basics, you know, and I'm not too good to say I'm over them.
Yeah.
And arguably the better you get, the more diverse those basics can become. There's layers.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely.
So
especially with dance, like it all kind of like builds on itself. And I think that's one of the downfalls of like social media being so popular is that dancers have access to see all these like amazing skills that they maybe couldn't see before. But what they're doing is then just like throwing the end result. They're not working on like the progressions up to that. And so I think there's like a safety impact.
Sure.
But then it's like they maybe have these skills, but like the technical execution of it leaves a little to be desired because they're not actually going through the progressions to get to that end result.
Yeah. Process. For parents who want their kids to be involved in dance, and maybe they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Yeah.
or first time in high school.
Yeah.
What is here's what you want to think about before putting them into dance that you would maybe mention to a parent? Because there's a lot of mixed.
I think, dance is tough because there isn't necessarily a consistent like judging rubric across competitions, styles, and if you're going to be in competitive dance, you're being judged. So I think just being aware of that even the most like positive environments, there's still this element of being judged on like what you're being perceived or what preferences are, because there isn't, like in gymnastics, it's this skill is worth this many points. Dance doesn't really work like that yet. Who's to say like we won't get to that point, in the future? But the way scoring works for competitive dance right now is just very open-ended. And so I think being aware of that, because there can be a lot of mental gymnastics that have to be done to kind of navigate what that feels like. And so as parents, like you just have to be their biggest cheerleader. You have to be their support system. You have to help them find the wins outside of the score sheet, because at the end of the day, it is always going to be someone's opinion. And that can be a really tough pill to swallow at any age.
Yeah.
And so just being aware of that and developing and fostering this like just sense of confidence and kind of, being unshakable based on others' opinions, is going to just like set these dancers up for success.
Yeah.
There's so much good that comes from dance too.
100%.
Like you learn so much about yourself. Again, the confidence, the poise, the way you're able to perform and like project, and just like the impact on public speaking. And like, there's so many positives that come from it, but it can also be a really terrifying space if you aren't mentally tough enough for it.
Yeah. So this is like a twofold question.
Yeah.
And it's under the umbrella of profession, like outside of dance.
Yeah.
So like dance, so many life lessons, I think. If you pull out some of those and then you apply that to maybe, you mentioned you were in a corporate position a while back, and what dance related insights have you used in corporate life or in maybe outside relationships?
Yeah. Teamwork. I think, working towards a common goal, working with a diverse group of people from, different backgrounds. You really, you get that a lot in dance, right? It's a universal language. And so like that kind of communication quality, can really become applicable outside of like the dance setting. I think you learn how to kind of turn it on. I think that was always something in my corporate space. How I would maybe interact when I was just like at my desk being kind of like goofy or chill or whatever. And then I would get into a conference room and present, and people were always like, "Whoa, I like didn't know you had that in you." And I'm like, well, I used to go, stand on stage in front of thousands of people. So like, yeah, I can turn it on. Right. It just builds this confidence, and you kind of get this, this alter ego. I know we've worked on that with my team, with you. You get these kind of alter egos that are applicable in all sorts of settings that really just help you kind of channel your best energy, your best self. And I think it's really cool to see. I see it all the time in my dancers, like, the way they interact in practice, and just like how they are goofy and silly, and then the way they just turn into these just like confident like monsters when they like tackle these really high pressure situations. It's exciting to think about how that's going to set them up outside of dance, because I know that like no matter what is thrown their way, they're going to be able to overcome it.
Yeah, that's so cool. How has your attention to body language changed over the years?
Oh, I'm big on body language.
Right?
Yeah.
Reading it. Because you're seeing them in so many different areas.
Yeah.
Tired, excited, fatigued, scared, nervous. Decades of analysis, you know? So like, tell me a little bit about that, and then how you use that outside of dances also.
Yeah. I think I've started to allow myself more context as I'm evaluating body language. I think, you know, like, yes, when they're, I as I get older, I'm trying to be better about always assuming positive intent too, right? Yeah. Like, they have their arms crossed. It probably isn't because they're, you know, like closed off. Yeah. It's because they're exhausted, because it's hour 6 of practice and they're just trying to like stay upright. Right. So I've allowed myself more context as I'm kind of like looking at body language. I think I pick up on facial cues so much more. I think dancers in general notice facial cues so much more because of the performance aspect, right? We are so used to being kind of like over the top with our facial expressions, with our eyes. So I think as we're speaking with people outside of dance, we get caught up in faces more than others, because that is something that we like train so often. And we're so used to being so expressive in all ways, right? Whether it's happy, sad, emotive, like dance, really, you know, you're telling stories. And so I think we focus so much on facial features that can probably almost be like off-putting to people, because like you can almost feel like, you know, a dancer can like stare into your soul and really like really make you feel uncomfortable. But I think I've allowed myself to be more influenced by the context of the situation as I'm looking at body language versus just my like initial gut reaction of what they are projecting.
Yeah.
I think social media has played a big role in that too. I think just like how we project, how we interact with the world around us is just different now because of social media. And so that's kind of something that I've been navigating of like.
It's like we're always on a documentary.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of been interesting to try to unfold a little bit and unravel of how that has kind of played a role in how people are interacting in the spaces that they're in.
Yeah. Yeah. When I interact with groups or individuals, there's always like a drop from superficial to depth. And you know it instantly, right? And so I'm assuming that there's places that you would want the team to get to or experience. And when that shift goes, you're like, there it is, you know? And I think it's cool for a coach like yourself to have that awareness, because if we walk around like we're being filmed all the time, whether it's us doing it or we hired someone to do it, then the mask always is on, you know, and that is also heavy and draining. And then on top of all the other things that you have to do, it's like you almost can get numb to it all. And numb as a dancer is just mechanical.
Yeah. You don't want that. Yeah.
No, it's emotion, and but also that emotion comes with a toll if you're not managing that properly. Because if you're constantly pushing those emotional buttons, then you're just like zapping again. So it's like finding that harmony between how much, at when, and for what. You know, and it sounds like you got a good read on that and continuing to refine. Yeah,
it's interesting because this last year, the jazz piece we did, This Woman's Work, was about loss. And it was, you know, about kind of grieving the loss of someone close to you and thinking through, you know, like conversations you wish you would have had before they passed. And so, you know, we talk a lot about the performance and the story behind it. And as we got closer and closer to competition, we as a coaching staff, like, again, had to really assess, because, you know, typically we would run the dance, and we can kind of tell as coaches how the team thought that run went based on their like body language post run, right? Like how were they how are they standing? How are they feeling? How are they communicating with each other? We could already kind of get a sense of how they felt it went.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is with this particular piece, they had to go to such a like, not negative space, but such a deep kind of personal, emotional space that every time we would run the dance, like they were still so deep in that, that there was never that like excitement or sense of pride or joy or accomplishment at the end of running it. And so as coaches, it took us a couple times to be like, oh my God, like
that was good about this?
like, yeah, do we not feel good about it? And they're like, no, we feel good. We're just like still in that headspace. And so we had to completely like pivot how we would interact with the team after a run, no matter how successful it was, because they were still in that like emotional space. Yeah. And it was such an interesting experience, because then you get to nationals and you've got these cameras on you as soon as you walk off the floor. They're filming you, like watching your routine. And I think people are expecting, just this like, let's go. And, the team is just like sobbing and like in their feelings. And I think for somebody like externally seeing that for the first time, they'd be like, oh my gosh, they're so disappointed in how that performance went based on what like their body language and external energy was. But we as coaches and those like in the circle knew like, no, this is actually like such a good thing. There's so much pride in this. It's just, like that context around it, it really opened my eyes to kind of like take that step back and give a little grace with how I'm maybe like observing some of that in other situations.
Such a emotional agility.
Yeah.
And the metaphor that kind of pops into my head is like a sponge. It's like during the routine, you're soaking yourself into that story, into that, and it's full. And, arguably maybe after the routine, you've squeezed some of that out, but there still may be some residue water that you got to like make sure
takes a while to dry out. Yes, absolutely. I love that analogy.
You immerse yourself into something else. And so that ability to bing, bing, bing.
Yeah.
Is I think what elite athletes can do.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Let's see. What, as we move into this next season, what would you say is exciting you the most? That maybe it's the same thing that it is every year, but if there is anything different, what would that be? Or what is that?
I'm excited to maybe just switch up what the expectations are for our team. I think when people think of like Minnesota dance, they maybe have a specific routine or performance or a skill in mind. And so I'm excited to just approach this season and think of it as just kind of like a clean slate and just kind of like refresh. I think that's the beauty of, yes, we're going for, we're defending a POM national championship, but I think that's the beauty of like 2 years of having gotten second in jazz. The risk feels less risky because again, what's the worst that's going to happen? We don't win. Already happened. Right. So I think it continues to remove some of that pressure and allows the athletes to just kind of go like all into it, because in their minds, the worst thing that could happen has already happened and they've been okay. So I'm excited to approach our season with that kind of just like openness of risk taking and trying new things. And again, that mentality of being able to just like focus on pushing the industry versus just the individual results for our team. Yeah.
I love it. 2 more questions, all backstage related.
Yeah.
2 scenarios. And maybe you've done a really good job in the prep, so you don't experience this as much, or maybe you had it more earlier in your career than now, but 2 scenarios. One is like you're right in the minutes before you go on and there's an athlete that is unsettled, super nervous, crying, not sure if they can do what they need to do. What do you do in those moments?
This is something I've learned from you. I think the importance of physical touch. We embrace. I think that kind of helps calm like their nervous system a little bit of just embracing. And then I think that's where we go back to those greats, right? We talk about all of the amazing things they've already accomplished, all of the moments they've already overcome these challenges. And we, you know, kind of look around at the circle and know that like they're supported and that they're doing this together, that it isn't just about them individually anymore, that it is about like the whole, and that there's, you know, we say there's nothing they could do on the Nationals floor that would disappoint us because we've done all the work leading up to that. And so I think that's kind of what we ground ourselves in those, you know, it doesn't happen often, but there are moments where, you know, somebody has a breakdown right before they take the stage. So it's about like reminding them that there's nothing they could do that's going to let anybody in our circle down because they've done the work leading up to it. And that's what actually mattered.
Yes. Another question popped up. Sorry. But so on the flip side, on the end of that, right, they come off and they didn't land something or it wasn't on the timing, right?
Yeah, it happens.
And it was micro, like the crowd probably had no idea, notice, but they know.
Yeah.
And they come off and they're just like stone cold, super numb, not looking at anybody, not interacting. What do you do in that moment?
Typically I'll pull those athletes kind of aside. We'll have a little moment and, you know, this has happened. Micro things and also big things have happened. You know, that's real. And we say like it's a moment, and you know what I really try to ground them in is if this were something that a teammate did, how would you respond or react to them? And they're usually like, I wouldn't be mad. I'd be so proud of them. And so we're like, okay, so then that's the grace you need to give to yourself too, because you know, like I said, that has happened. And so we're fortunate that we get to kind of like watch our performance immediately following. So I'll usually, you know, try to get them to get in that moment, get out of their head for a second. I'll tell them like, hey, we can address this. This moment right now, we're going to celebrate with our team. I want you to watch the rest of the routine. I don't want you to watch yourself. I want you to watch the whole and see how great the whole is. Focus on the team, not yourself. And then, usually that conversation after is, okay, like if this same thing had happened to, you know, Kristen to your right, what would you say to her? Yeah. And usually their answer is, I'd say I'm still so proud. And like, I know they're going to nail it in finals, or if it happened in finals, like I know that they did everything they could to be prepared for that moment, and stuff happens. And I'd say, okay, so tell yourself that too. So it's really about getting them to talk to themselves the way they would talk to a teammate in that same situation. As
opposed to just coming to them and be like, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because for them, it's not.
It's not, right? Like that was the moment and it didn't happen. And the reality is that happens all the time. Like I can't name a single performance that has won a national championship or not where we haven't had something happen. Like we talk about that leading up to nationals. If I can guarantee anything, it's that something's going to happen, right? Like we are not working for perfection. What we're working towards is being trained enough to handle whatever happens on the floor. And so what we try to acknowledge is less about the moment of like the error that happened and more about how they responded and reacted and thrived after that. Because in every single instance, that's what happens. They touched on a skill, they nail their solo later. They fall down on an aerial turn. Well, how proud that like they crushed the performance for the last 30 seconds after, and their teammate next to them was so smart and made such a good solve that like, you know, it's just like there's so many things that you can still acknowledge and be proud of and celebrate.
True.
That we try to pivot on that. Like, hey, maybe you're not happy about that, but look at how smart you were in that moment. That takes a really strong dancer to have like recovered like that. Like that's what we try to focus on, because stuff's going to happen. We're not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, and we're not aiming for perfection.
Yeah. So good. So good. Okay. Last question. Nationals, wild energy, so many distractions, teams everywhere, people everywhere, energy everywhere. What are like, how do you keep, and maybe this isn't the right word, so feel free to reframe however you need. Like, how do you keep what you do sacred amidst all of that chaos? And is it something you say? Is it how you find the right locations, spaces? Like, how do you think about that?
We talk about the bubble.
Okay.
So we practice the bubble before we get, and we practiced the bubble when you were there too, when you came in and worked with the team, but it's about being able to kind of like drown out that external noise, whether that is like physical, actual noise or just like, the thoughts running around your head, and just focus in on the team and like your safe space. And so that's kind of our like trigger word is, like when we're in a space that's overwhelming, there's stuff happening everywhere, we'll be like, hey, bubble. And that's kind of like our way to like hone back in. We talk about within the bubble, staying vocal. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to like scream and yell, but it's about continuing to communicate with each other. In some spaces, it is about being loud and like letting your presence be known. And that's kind of what helps like pull you into the bubble when there's a lot happening. But yeah, at nationals, like, it's hit or miss if we're going to be able to be in the hallway we like to stretch. Maybe there's another team there. Maybe they changed the rules and Disney won't let you be there anymore, right? Or, hey, they rearranged the marking room. And so what you were visualizing the whole time has actually shifted a little bit. But when we can say bubble, that kind of pulls us back into like, hey, our group right here, we're not going to like let any external noise, literal or figurative, like infiltrate that bubble. And we're just going to focus on what we need to do.
So cool. I love it. Amanda, I just want to thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I'm glad
thank you
that
for having me.
You're in this industry. And I love how your approach to long-term is continuing to shape and influence the dance community. I think it's important that more coaches use that lens, regardless of how long they plan on coaching. Like, how is your actions this year, today, going to impact 3, 5, 7 years later? And I think that's just valuable for life in general. And Warren Buffett says, like, one of his key insights, it's like, if you were the business that you're in, if you were only going to be in that business for the next 100 years, how would you build it? And it forces people to say, would I hire this person knowing that I'm going to build this thing for 100 years?
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
This business decision, 100 years. Okay. It just forces you to think deeper about who you surround yourself with, what you want to get involved with, how you show up to a space. And so to hear you say that is it mirrors a little bit of that energy, which is cool. Any last words before we wrap?
No, I just want to say thank you so much. I know you made such a positive impact on the team and our journey and experience last season. So it's been great to chat.
Honored. Yeah. Honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.